Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Line Change, the NHL betting podcast from the Action Network, presented to you by our sponsors, BetMGM. My name is Michael Leboff. My co-host, as always, to this entire regular season, it's been Nick Martin. And Nick, we are, I think, at the part of the NHL schedule where it would be a consensus that this is the best week of hockey, the first few games of round one. And as such, there's so much to dive into from a betting perspective, and we're just going to get right to it. So this is how the format of the show is going to go. We're just going to go series by series, and we'll start chronologically. And we'll break down that series if we like the series price, what we think about game one, and then we'll touch on any player props, exotics, futures, etc., that we like related to those two teams before moving on to the next one. For example, we'll start with the Islanders and Hurricanes. If both of us like Hudson Fasching to win the Conn Smythe Award, we will talk about that as we break down Islanders and Canes. So we'll start there. A bit of a trendy underdog, the Islanders. They're plus 165 at BetMGM to win the series. Canes minus 200. We had this conversation for a couple days now, just back and forth. We know that the Islanders have a chance here. Of course they do. But is the love in the market warranted, or are people just trying to find that one upset, and the logical landing spot is Ilya Sorokin?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big part of it. There's not many other underdogs that are looking too trendy right now. I don't think this is kind of the main one. I agree. And it seems like across the board, it's kind of almost even like the Oilers have become, everyone's cup pick. Like it almost seems like a year where it's very hard to come up with some of the underdogs, I think. So I agree that that is kind of part of it. It seems to me like we're getting to the point where maybe there's a bit of disrespect towards how strong of a team the Canes have proven to be. But I guess have they proven that in the regular or in the playoffs? Not entirely by any means. So for me, I thought that the series price looked pretty sharp. I'll start from there. That's kind of my main take on the series, that I'm not overly interested in getting involved with that number. I see the logic. It's going to be a ton of low scoring hockey. I think the unders are going to start at 5.5. And if we saw them get to 5, that wouldn't be at all surprising.
Yeah, we're starting to see that already. The game one line has the over under at 5.5. The under is juiced to minus 130. The Canes are favored minus 165 in game one. Isles plus 140. I would say both game one and the series line, I think it's Islanders or nothing. The Hurricanes, like you said, like they might be getting disrespected when you look at their overall body of work this season. Win the Metro Division. They should have won it going away, but they stumbled down the stretch, and that's kind of why people are starting to get lukewarm on them. And now there's a reason why they stumbled down the stretch, is that they lost perhaps their most dynamic offensive scorer in Andrei Svechnikov. Since he went down, they're 9-8-1 in their last 18 games. They have a -2 goal difference in that span. There is a clear path to success for the Islanders here. It's lean into your goaltending advantage and just get enough goal scoring that the Hurricanes, who struggle to score and have struggled to score without Svechnikov, just can't make up for that goaltending edge. The Hurricanes also got they led the NHL in goal scoring from the defensemen. If that dries up and you're not getting that scoring by committee from, skater 1 through 18, it's trouble. I know the same thing is true about the Islanders, but they're the underdog here. So you're not really looking for, you're not trying to poke holes in the Islanders. You're trying to lift them up. Well, you're trying to do the opposite with Carolina. So with the goaltending edge, the fact that a lot of the things that both these teams do a lot of things wrong, as any team, and they're very similar. Like, power plays aren't great. For the Islanders, it's abysmal. Maybe it gets better with Matt Barzal. Hurricanes' power play has been going downhill since Svechnikov is hurt. Their play driving is still fine. They're going to pump a ton of rubber at the Islanders. And I know that kind of leans into where you're looking in game one. But I just think that, logically speaking, the path to success for the Islanders is there. The Hurricanes not having Svechnikov and just not having anyone who can just score an easy goal, I think plays into this as well. There should be some serious pressure on the Hurricanes as well after a bunch of playoff disappointments. So, look, this is a team that in their last 22 games or so, it's been Jesperi Kotkaniemi who's led them in scoring. So there are some signs here. Now, the Hurricanes can also just come out and smother anybody in the NHL. They're so relentless on the forecheck. They're so good at getting the puck out, relieving pressure, and just getting to work. There could be a couple games of the series where you feel like, do the Islanders even touch the puck? But in the games where the Islanders can get the Canes off script even just a little bit or get a break, they're dangerous. So I do think that they're a live underdog. I wish the price was a little higher, but it'd be Isles or nothing for me. Game 1 and the series.
Yeah, I think this is one where I'm probably going to have this kind of coward's answer a couple times, but like you don't need to bet pre-series, and that's an obvious thing to say, but it can be pretty strategic to just see how the games go and see what you're thinking. And I think in round 1 of the playoffs, that's often something I really like to do, where like you can find so much market value if you just really pay attention, I think. And this is just a series where, to me, I'm not overly interested in getting in on much until I see how the games go. It's like obviously a very easy answer to just say that I could see it going both ways, but that really is how it is. Like if Carolina came out and just completely starched them and it just proved to be too much, how much they're maybe going to control the play and might own the puck, that would make sense. But if the games end up just being complete coin flips where it's 50-50 and really just breaking through with offense for Carolina is so tough, then that would make sense as well. And I feel like for now, it's just, we don't really know what to expect. And, we're not forced to give out picks. We're not forced to bet on anything. And for me, I just think this is a good time to like keep that in mind and kind of see how it goes.
Game 1, you're going to look at an angle that I think you might do a couple different
Yeah,
times in the series.
probably a couple times in a lot of series. It's an angle I think down the stretch was excellent to me, and backing Sorokin to go over, I'm guesstimating 30.5 or 31.5 saves is going to be a look that I'm really interested in to start this series. We'll see how the games go. Maybe New York can kind of defensively play a little bit of a cleaner game. But I think for the Isles, a lot of the time that's not going to mean less shots. That's going to be meaning less in the way of breakdowns, where I think a lot of the play will be in the Islanders' end. And they're all right with that. They just don't want to give up these chances where it's something Sorokin can't handle. I think Carolina's going to have a ton of point shots in this series, ton of trying to just create chaos and rebounds and tip-ins and that sort of thing, which is all great for this angle where hopefully they'll just be firing pucks. We know that that's what Carolina wants to do. I don't think Rod's in there telling this team to change up the strategy. Maybe a couple games in. I think at the start, they'll be thinking, let's get as much chaos as possible. Let's fire pucks on the net. Let's be conservative. We're not thinking about this of like a point shot ends the play, and we don't like that. They seem to never have that mentality. So with how they might carry the play, I like that. I think it's a square take that makes sense at the start. So I've kind of got that one circled as a good play to start out with here.
In terms of some player props, etc., exotics, futures related here, I think that Ilya Sorokin at 80-1 for the Conn Smythe. This is an angle we always talk about when we do playoff previews. Is there are certain teams where if you're gonna bet them to win the Stanley Cup, just double check the Conn Smythe odds. And this is going to be our first example, probably of many on the show, where we say if the Islanders are going to surprise everybody as a 50-1 outsider to win the Stanley Cup, it means that Ilya Sorokin has stolen the show in the Stanley Cup playoffs and will win the Conn Smythe. He's 80-1. That's one. And then in terms of a couple of guys who I like to lead the series in goal scoring, I like Pierre Engvall and I like JG Pageau as long shots. Engvall's 35-1. Pageau is 40-1. My thinking with this series in this market is that you can give me whatever long shot you like, and you can talk me into it. I'll hear basically anybody from any team, because think about it logically. The total for this game 1 is already heading towards 5. So let's say it goes 6 games. That means bookmakers are expecting 30 goals in those 6 games. Split them up among the two teams. Let's say 17 for one, 13 for another. It's not going to take all that much to lead your team in scoring. So a guy like Pageau, who maybe he doesn't score much in the regular season, He does seem to be a playoff performer. Maybe he gets a game where he scores twice. Maybe he does it 2 times in the series. Maybe Engvall, who's been really, really good with the Islanders on the second line with Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri, he has a couple big games. You get to 4 or 5 goals, and you're feeling pretty lucky. So I think any player at decent odds is worth a look here in this series.
Yeah, so I like Brent Burns is 41. I think that's a really good one. If you could bet on to lead the series in shots, I probably would. So, or I would at least, pending the odds, obviously, but take a look in that direction. If some of his trickle in and they're really close series, a lot of point shots coming in, I think that Burns definitely is a good angle at 40-1. And then I kind of like Natris as chalk, and Teravainen is another option. Those were kind of my guys. You probably picked up the good Islanders. I would maybe have considered Nelson, but just
his odds are short.
Because the thing is that I kind of like is out of the chalkier guys, there's a few that I think relative to other series, I can see just having a bigger series, if you know what I mean. Where I feel like the gap is better. And then the other one, so with Natchez over Aho, I kind of still just think Natchez this year is going to be more of a pure goal scorer. So we'll see. Those are mine. I think Burns would be the one that I would say is my favorite relative to price, especially if you're, not wanting to put too much money down across what can become a pretty huge playoff card pretty quick.
Yeah. Next series up, Florida and the Bruins. The Bruins, we don't need to get into it. Historic regular season. They're minus 350. Florida plus 275. There's been some rumblings that the Panthers are a little bit of a dangerous matchup here. I think this is price probably right. The number's not big enough to go against the Bruins, I don't think, over a 7-game series, especially with the question marks in goal for Florida. So I'll pass in all likelihood on the series price. The one thing I'll say before, I've heard some people talk about the Panthers being a dangerous matchup for Boston, and I almost think the opposite, where it's you're looking at, they can score, they're dangerous on the rush, whatever, but the Bruins are so good at managing a game, and the goaltending edge here just goes to Boston, where there could be games where Florida maybe outshoots them 35-25, and if that is the case, I still think you'd be comfortable with Boston because of the breakdowns you're going to see from Florida compared to the breakdowns you're going to see from Boston, and the guy that's going to be charged with putting out those fires, which is Linus Ullmark, the Vezina winner this year, versus either Sergei Bobrovsky or Alex Lyon. So it's just hard. I can see it. I can see the Panthers giving them tough games and etc. Of course they will, but it's just not enough.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. I wouldn't play Florida just because of how the playoffs work. They're a little live. I think that's the number one thing that I kind of see that I would say is a really foolish mindset, and kind of is, I don't think anyone that's overly sharp would think, is teams aren't locks. These games are, they're tight. They're priced where they are for a reason. It's not like they're just going to outright smoke them. If I were to say kind of what I think about why Florida's live, I would say just my general take would be that I think Florida is a better wild card team than your average wild card team. If I had to summarize kind of, why maybe they should have a shot, I think that would be a really brief way to, get into it. But as you're going to see with any wild card team, they're a little flawed. Their goaltending could be a train wreck. If this series wasn't close at all because those guys just completely fell apart, that would be very believable.
Yep.
I think the Bruins will get through. Probably Bruins in 5. The old gentleman's sweep seems like the most logical take, and kind of what I'm imagining, where something along the lines of Florida looking, at times in the series dangerous, but ultimately just not kind of finding a way to capitalize with wins and stuff. And that's kind of the summary of the Bruins season. Every game where it seems like it's 50-50, it's not. They have Ullmark and they like playing in those positions. So if there's a few where kind of it seems that way, and maybe Florida steals one in Florida, that could be reasonable. The one thing that I was thinking I might kind of tap into, just so much emotion and maybe a bit of a volatile situation, is if Florida is something crazy 6-1 to win the first 10 minutes tomorrow, I
Yeah.
might consider that
I
and
was
just try
just
to
about to
see,
say
because I
Florida to
feel
score
like you
first is
see stuff
interesting.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see stuff like that where it comes out like it's, the start of the game, everyone's getting into it, guys are nervous, stuff happens. So I could probably talk myself into putting a bit of a punt down on that and seeing where it goes. Um, and then, yeah, I think me and you agreed on what is the best Bruins future left on the board.
Yeah. I'm shocked at this
With
number.
Bergeron. I fully agree. And so Bergeron's 30-1 to win the Conn Smythe is the pick we're talking about. I think it's such a good pick because this award is so much more narrative driven than people think. Like there's so many times if you actually look at the true value of a player's play in the playoffs, it's so close and it always goes to the narrative that is better. I think Crosby beating Kessel, the one, I know Crosby's a way better two-way player than Kessel, but that's a really good example where the vote wasn't really even close. And Kessel was unreal that year. Like ask any Caps fan who we were pissed off about playing in that series. It wasn't Crosby. He had like 2 points. Kessel was insane. And I think that's just a good example for a lot of the picks that we're going to have, where on top of the logic of like chances are Bergeron's going to be close with the other guys. But if it's close, it's going to Bergeron.
Yep.
Like you're getting probably not even close, probably anything.
It might not even have to be that close, honestly.
No, every media member loves Patrice Bergeron, and he has such a good rep of being an unreal two-way player. They're going to play a
Exactly.
lot of close games. Even if Allmark is like a stud, which he probably would be if they won, I think it would have to be like really clear, and chances are they'll control enough of the play where you're not saying like the goalie stole them this. So I think it's a really good case for Bergeron 30-1, especially when you're like at a point where Boston has more guys that could conceivably win this award than most with Pasternak, Marchand, Allmark. But I just think that you're going to get so many guys who want to vote for Patrice that this is such a good number when the Bruins are now down to 3.5-1 to win it all.
Exactly. I think a couple things that I'll just add to that is, like you said, he's an amazing two-way player, and has won the Selke Award however many times since in his career. So let's say David Pasternak, who's the favorite to win this award at some sports books, scores 15 goals in the playoffs or whatever. There are going to be media people out there who say, yeah, but Bergeron was a two-way force. The guy just dominated.
And the leadership.
And the leadership.
They vote on that
and
too. Like Crosby probably was the most important. And that's the thing. Like, like Bergeron is the most important to the Bruins. Like
yep.
The players would probably say it. So I think it's just one of those things where like coming in, that seems to be the mindset. And I think it would take something crazy from Pasta or Allmark to.
And the elephant in the room is Bergeron. If they win the Stanley Cup, it's very likely he retires. And there's going to be a media contingent that they just wouldn't be able to live with themselves if they didn't give this guy the Conn Smythe Award.
It's too perfect. It would have to be like so black and white that he wasn't the guy, and it won't be because they'll say honestly, leadership, two-way play.
We're gonna give out a lot of bets. This, I think, of the bunch we give out, this is the one to me that I think. Just listen to us on this one. Even if it doesn't win,
everyone wants to bet Boston. Like there's so many people that whatever we say, they want to bet Boston. So just take us with our opinion that this is a good way to do that. And like to talk quickly on the Bruins, because I did when I did Tim and Charlie's show last week, they asked me. I still would say they're the most likely team to win the cup out of the East, but less often than the number. And it's not something I want to bet. Would kind of be my summary of that, because I know so many people want to do that. I think it's going to be a lot harder than them, and this has kind of been my take all year. But it's going to be harder than the numbers suggest, and I think they're less far away from the other teams as you would think for a team that was historically good. They were just so incredible in those close games. Allmark was incredible. Swayman was by the end of the year, he was such a good backup. Like he was just playing unreal hockey. So a lot of the things that made them that much better than every other regular season team, I don't think are in play here. I actually like them less entering the playoffs than I liked Colorado last year by some margin. I just thought that Colorado team could just completely scorch teams out of the water. And I haven't seen that as often with the Bruins. And I know it's a little different. We're talking about a team that gets by because they have such incredible goaltending, but it just seems there's more to me. But who knows? That's kind of a very contended take right now. I've seen like people I respect saying that they think the Bruins are actually still very, very bettable at this number. So
Interesting.
we'll see.
Let's talk Wild and Stars. The game one line is reflected in the series line as well. The series is Wild plus 120. They're the road team. Stars minus 140. This is a 2-3 matchup in the Central. I've got nothing for either game one or the series, so I'll just pass it over to you.
Yeah, I don't have a lot here. Two pretty similar teams. We happen to agree on our two takes of like bets we'd want to lock in now with this series. So maybe without dwelling on it too much, I think Gustafsson 100-1. He's everyone's going to point to Kaprizov, but if the Wild win, I think he's going to be the reason why. And this series is going to be such a good kickstart on that because it should be super tight, super low scoring. Where unless one of those guys ends up with like a few of the more important goals, I think both goalies in this series are going to get a huge start on their Conn Smythe case. I don't really love either of these teams from an outright perspective, but their Conn Smythe numbers, I think there's 45-1, are good enough that I want to get involved because it's just all about trying to process like what percentage of time do you think they could win the cup and your goalie or your player that you're targeting doesn't win, because that's obviously a disaster. But for these guys, like I think Gustafsson, the Wild are 20-1, he's 100-1.
Yep.
It's about as good a case as you make. It's pretty much him or Kaprizov every time. And I think just because of the way the Wild will need to win versus good teams, I don't see it being Kaprizov nearly as often.
And he's done it. He's done it the past month and a half. If obviously in the playoffs you're playing a good team every night, so he's not going to be facing, the Arizona Coyotes one night and the Calgary Flames another night and then taking on the Chicago Blackhawks. But when you look at Gustafsson's numbers down the stretch, he's obviously in good form. So
right, and think like that works to your case though too, because like when they play Colorado, they're going to need Gustafsson to be
he's going to be called on for 42 saves a night, right?
Yeah, so I think both of them are really solid ways to get some action on these if you want, and like you could pretty much split up like a unit on these Conn Smythe picks and have like a pretty good little portfolio of cup outrights that are probably pretty live if those teams win. So that's pretty much the approach that I'm taking.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. Like I said, I like Gustafsson at 100-1. There's one series, and this is the same strategy that I was talking about with the Islanders and Hurricanes. In all likelihood, or I shouldn't say that, the most likely outcome of the series is a tight series, low scoring games. So you're not asking too much out of somebody to lead the series in scoring. That being said, like there are some serious players in this pool compared to like the Islanders and Hurricanes, where the ceiling just isn't as high. When you're comparing Martin Necas, who's a great player, but he's not the goal scorer that Jason Robertson is. So that it's, and then obviously Kaprizov on the other side. Then you can throw in Brock Nelson or Horvat or whoever as like the number one guy on the other team, and the ceiling just isn't as high in that Islanders Canes one. But the point remains that it shouldn't take all that many goals to lead this series in scoring. So Evgeny Dadonov for Dallas is interesting to me at 80-1. He'll get some time in the top six in all likelihood, maybe some power play here and there, but if he can do something crazy, a 2 or 3 goal game once, it's interesting. So he's the only one that in that market I'd have circled. I think everyone else is way too short.
I kind of liked Pavelski. He's just got such good hands around the net. He's always in front, tipping pucks, getting rebounds. I think in this series, that's going to be pretty relevant. Like you could probably see a lot of Stars power play goals where he's out front grinding and tips something in or gets a rebound, and he scores so many goals anyways. Like I still think it's almost surprising he fell that much behind Robertson and Hintz. So Pavelski's kind of the one that I like.
Yeah, he's 8-1. It's
crisis.
8-1 for Pavelski. It's just not my style. You know that.
I know it's not. But if it was, and then the other thing, I'm kind of starting to lean towards, like, I think Dallas I like more. Like I would almost play them at this series price. And the Ek loss sucks to talk.
Yeah, I mean it's a big deal.
That sucks for the Wild. Their center depth is awful, and he's such a he's like a Dano where like you're not going to outplay some of these guys, but he helps you try to race those minutes and play even. So that loss hurts the Wild. I think it will be a pretty close series, but I think the Stars have a good shot for sure.
Yeah. And I think that if I were to attack a team thing, I think it almost would be Stars in a sweep because of what you just said. Like, there's a chance this Wild team is just overmatched without Eck, right? You look down the middle, Freddie Gaudreau is a nice player. He's not a number one center, like, or whoever they're gonna have to play up there with, or he's not like a number one or number two center. It's it's tough. Then you go down the list and you're talking about like Connor Dewar is gonna get some minutes or something. It's ugly down the middle for Minnesota.
Yeah, and
So
that's
they're
not what you want if you're looking at like this Stars team, because like that's almost something, that's a weakness that some teams would be exposing. Whereas
right.
now we're talking about minutes where the Stars are going to win some of the depth minutes, and then their top lines, like you're happy to have that line head to head with anyone. So it seems like a decent bit for the Stars, but
Yeah.
it's another one where like the playoff variance is going to be high because it's going to be really hard to score on mini. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
the I think the Wild are kind of in that same boat as the Hurricanes a little bit, where this injury, like the team getting banged up down the stretch has seriously thrown some cold water on a team that had some people backing them to make some serious to do some serious damage a month ago, not even a month ago, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So maybe I'm being too harsh on Minnesota, but that it is just scary to look at when you like pull up the projected lines. That is the last game to get started on Monday night, excuse me, will be Edmonton and Los Angeles. The series line is Oilers minus 250, Kings plus 200. Game 1, Oilers minus 190, Kings plus 160. I do think there's one bet that's interesting, and it could just be just waiting out the market and seeing if Edmonton falls behind 1-0 in the series or 2-1 in the series. But Oilers from behind, I think, could have some value, 3-1 or better, because they're rolling. Everybody knows it. Everyone's on board with this bandwagon. And you talked about the Avalanche being the team you
the
could see.
bandwagon's fucked now. It's crazy. The Oilers are everybody's pick. Like I almost like want to like switch it up in some of my brackets and like
Yeah,
do different
well,
shows
I
and
think it's
stuff
a
like
good
that.
point. Like, if
Now
you're in a
it's like,
big
holy,
playoff pool,
are
if
they
you're in a
this much
big
better?
but if you're in a big playoff pool, you should just not pick the Oilers to come out of the West. Like, even picking
Right.
Colorado will give you some contrarian value because everybody and it makes a lot of sense that people are all over the Oilers. They're 18-2-1 or 17-2-1 since they got Matthias Ekholm. They got a point. They went 13-0-1. They got a point in every one of their last 14 or 15 games, whatever it was. They have Connor McDavid. They're playing lights out stuff. The Kings are not a pushover here, and I was really confident in the Oilers. The more and more I think about it, the more and more I like this angle of. I think ultimately Edmonton comes out okay. Like they get through the series, but it's gonna be ugly or uglier than I think people realize, and that's why I like either playing them right off the bat in the prop market, Oilers from to win the series from behind, or if they do go down 1-0 or 2-1, then getting into it, or if they're down 3-2, bet them to win the Stanley Cup then, because that's when you if you really want to feel like you missed the boat on the Oilers, that's fine, but you're probably going to get a better number at some point in the playoffs than what you're going to be dealing with right now, unless they just do what the Avalanche did and just scorch everybody.
Yeah, I think there's still value with them though because McDavid's 12 to 1 to
Yep.
win the Conn Smythe. So I'd play
Yeah.
that because Dry would need to go off. I don't think it's
No,
Skinner
it's not. It's
almost
just
ever. I still think
yeah.
they need to win too many high scoring games, and when they play the really good teams, they will be somewhat high scoring. I think so. It's McDavid almost all of the time. I think Draisaitl could obviously go off, but I still just think
No,
this
it's going to
season
be
the way
McDavid.
it's gone.
I
So
think
yeah, I think
if
12 to 1
Draisaitl
is
scores
something.
10 more points than McDavid in a Stanley Cup winning effort, I still think McDavid gets it.
Yeah, like that's where it would start to need to be like what it takes
Yeah.
is drive really, really
Or Stuart
outscoring
Skinner
them.
lets in 2 goals in 16 games.
Yeah, for
Like,
sure.
that's
So
it.
I think play McDavid, see how it goes. If the Oilers win the cup and Draisaitl wins the Conn Smythe, then you can blame me. And the other thing, I think McDavid would be live to win the Conn Smythe and lose the final. I
Yes.
100% could
Yeah.
see
J.S.
this being
Jaguar
the first
style.
year that happens in forever. Like if they play Boston and Boston's just clearly a better team all across the board, but McDavid has like 2 points a game up to that point, that would be realistic. And then I think you're still cashing the Conn Smythe with them losing the cup. So that's actually pretty awesome on that front too.
Interesting dilemma in like playoff pools where you got to pick a player from each team. Let's say you're in a 100-person pool. Do you play McDavid, or are you going to be one of the three people in the pool that goes with Draisaitl? I think.
It's an
So,
interesting debate because you
yeah.
might be setting yourself pretty far behind, but
Yep.
also you can get dry. So it's not like some of these debates
Right.
where you're being contrarian and it's just stupid.
Yep. All
Uh,
right. So let's flip to Tuesday's games. All right, Tuesday's game ones. We'll start with the Devils and Rangers. The Devils have home ice advantage as the 2 seed. They're a -120 favorite on the series line, -130 in game one. I think of all the series, uh, when you look around hockey Twitter and pundits and people like you and I think this is the series that will split people the most in terms of who they actually end up picking. I think you could put 1,000 hockey fans in a room and you'll get close to 500 and 500 on either side because there are tangible examples and there's good evidence for both teams.
and it is the closest by odds makers
Yes,
too
exactly.
on the
Yeah.
bet. So
Yeah. Um, you could look at the Devils and say the expected goals, the high danger numbers, everything 5-on-5 that a lot of sharp bettors look at overwhelmingly points to the Devils. I think since the trade deadline, the Rangers have had the worst expected goals percentage of the 16 teams in the playoffs. But we said it we said it all last year. We're saying it all again this year. The New York Rangers are able to beat those metrics. They have a lot of talent up front, playmaking, passing, and shooting talent. I think people kind of always just blanket that with finishing talent. But finishing talent, sure, they do have that, but they also have the guys to make the finish a lot easier than it should be, whether it's a backdoor pass by Adam Fox or just a great no look pass from Artemi Panarin. They'll set up their line mates, etc., with really scoreable opportunities. So they also have the goalie, Igor Shesterkin, who was not himself for the first few months of the year, but has come into down the stretch really well. So everything in the series, like it's not. And here's the other funny thing that I think is really interesting about this. These aren't saying that it's going to be no one's saying it's going to be, oh, this is going to be a close series, because this thing could go off the rails in 100 different ways. They're just saying that it's really hard to pick a winner. I honestly don't know if this is going to be a close series. I think that whatever team, like the Devils can just absolutely wrestle the puck from the Rangers and not let them touch it and take advantage of the Rangers forwards not being great defensively, not being all that careful managing the puck, and just blow the Rangers out of the water. Or the Rangers could just, the Shesterkin could be stand on his head. The Rangers could finish everything, and Vanacek could just not be up to snuff in goal for the Devils. So just because the odds are tight doesn't mean I think the series is going to play out as tight as it is. And I think that is an angle to look at. Betting either team to win like in a sweep or 4-1. Interesting way to look at it. My favorite bet, though, I like Andre Palat at 55-1 to lead the series in goals. Disappointing year from him. He's been hurt. Playoff pedigree is really good. Obviously, 3 straight trips to the Stanley Cup with the Lightning. He had 11 goals in 2 of the last 3 postseasons. And he's going to play in a top 6, in all likelihood, that's just dripping with talent. Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, Timo Meier. He should get plenty of playing time. I think playing him on one of those 2 top lines is going to be pretty important to Lindy Ruff. Have a responsible guy who's been there before, playing with the young guys who's going through it for the first time. He's going to be very trusted by his coaching staff. So I think he's interesting here because both of these teams, you could see the scoring just gets spread around. So maybe Palat's just lucky and scores 6, and it's a short series for the Devils, and he walks out with a 55-1 ticket. So that's my pick.
Yeah, he skated top power play today too, which is huge for that. I actually really, really do like the chances that this series is really close, because I think what's going to happen is New Jersey's going to control the play pretty heavily, and there'll be some nights where maybe it looks like they're running away with it. But I think what will happen is Shesterkin wins them a couple games, and there's a few games where they just manage to hang in. And my head is telling me that the Devils should win this series. I think that there's some flaws going on with the Rangers that are really concerning, but part of me also just thinks the Rangers have that weird Mugambo where they just find some way to get this into 7 and get caved in and win by goal. So I don't know. I think the Devils are a fair bit better of a team. The one thing that's going to be really interesting is New York's power play has struggled. That power play absolutely should not ever struggle. And the problem is that, like, it seems like since Kane's come in, they have too many guys who do the same thing. They can't figure out where to slot everyone. But they just need to pick something, like you have the Zibanejad one-timer, and Fox is unreal at the top. Probably should have Panarin out on the other wall. I know it kind of leaves Kane out of like where he wants to be, but I think they just need to pick something and let it settle in, because that's kind of the X factor for me, where like down the stretch, the Rangers power play wasn't that good, but it should be so good. So do they figure that out? I definitely wouldn't be surprised if we saw it like end up going off where they just find the right arrangement, because all the pieces are there. Like the talent is there where I don't think it ever should struggle, and they need it to go, because I don't think they're going to carry more of the play at 5-on-5. They could be opportunistic and like hang in because they'll finish at a high rate. And it's probably more likely that Vanacek drastically drops off in the playoffs than some goaltenders. I think there's a ton of goalies like that this year though, where like, and I mean, I guess it's kind of just a lot of goalies. It's so volatile, but like there's not many goalies where you're so pumped to have that option. Like if Samsonov was complete shit, I would never be surprised. Like if he just fell apart and they were like, holy fuck, this guy can't save anything, I'd buy that. I think there's a lot of goalies in that boat, and Vanacek's
Even
kind of one
Omar
of them.
kind of could fall into it, right?
100%. Like last year, no one thought he'd be this good this year.
Yeah.
And last year in the playoffs, it didn't go very well for him. So I don't think there's many goalies where you're like super stoked on the situation, which is pretty interesting. Like I kind of think this playoff, we might see more chaos than people are expecting. I'm kind of getting in that boat where I think we're going to see 1 or 2 where it's just like, holy shit, the Kraken beat the Avs or something like that. So we'll see. I'm hoping it kind of goes like that.
Tuesday 7:30 game 1 on will be next, and that's the Leafs and the Lightning. We'll look at the series odds. Leafs -155, Lightning +135. The Maple Leafs are -150 in game 1, Lightning +130. We had a conversation like when this line opened, and I had a feeling that this line would take off towards Toronto, and it had. It was -140.
Shows you your money versus smaller money, I think.
Yeah.
Like we're talking lines moving, because like every single casual fan I read was, how do I not slam Tampa here? How is like, this is such a good number. They never beat, like Toronto can't beat them, and Toronto loses in the first round every year. Like I think there's people who are looking at this as that history means so much, and that makes Tampa like a lock. And maybe, I mean, if they lose this one, then you kind of do look like a genius for saying that. But I think that's
interesting, because I'm not seeing many people pick the Bolts, and I don't think the number's big enough to do it, considering the.
And I think it hurt that they down the stretch did not stabilize at all. No one saw
they stabilized for like a week. A week they were like, all right, everyone was like, okay, they're back.
And it was like months where we were like, when are they going to pick it up? Like we know kind of don't care right now, and it just seemed like the decor. It was that Boston game.
Of course, it was the Bruins brought the best out of them, and then they kind of just carried that for the next 3 games, and then they were like, okay, that's enough. We should but also I still don't blame them. Like, why would they care about any of the games they played since January 1st? Like,
but the problem is the guys, the names are different. Like, I don't know that these guys can do what.
But those guys did also at the same time. They banked a ton of points for this team, in the first half. So
For sure.
like you can look at it in a million different ways. The one angle I like here is game one. I like betting Tampa. You just mentioned it with Samsonov. He's going to go into this game not having played in 8 days, 9 days, whatever it's going to end up being. And the reason they were handling him carefully, he was banged up in one of them, came out. I know they said it's precautionary or whatever, or it didn't come out, whatever it was, but they admitted that he was banged up. And just having having that break compared to Vasilevsky, I know it's the same break for them, but that Vasilevsky is the more likely goalie to be himself in game one, even though he started those series pretty slow last year. The other thing is I think the break helps Tampa more than it would help Toronto, who went into the Maple Leafs continued just kind of playing the way they were playing, albeit with rotated rosters into the end of the regular season. And we know that fatigue is a big reason why a lot of people are picking the Leafs. Like the Lightning have played so much hockey in such a condensed schedule because of how far they've gone. So I think that does help a little bit. And yeah, I think that the line at plus 130 for game one, and it could go up a little bit. I think there's going to be a lot of people, given what we've seen on the series number, who are going to back Toronto. I think it's a good bet. You just back the Lightning to get it done. Hope Vasilevsky can outduel Samsonov, and we'll see. We'll see if the city's still standing as well, if that does happen.
Yeah, I actually disagree entirely. I think it's a good spot to back the Leafs. I think this might be the only game where the name power holds the price in where it is. The Leafs are plus 180 to cover the puck line. They are plus 120 to win regulation. I think those are both numbers that I like. They've played such a more well-rounded game that when we're getting past plus money, I'd rather take my chance that this holds up, that Toronto takes advantage in this spot. It's game one. They smoked Tampa in game one last year, I think. And that doesn't necessarily matter. But I just think at this point, I'd rather tap into the idea that Toronto is just this much better than them from what they've shown this year, rather than backing into the idea that Tampa's the two-time champs, three-time cup finalists. I think Toronto's a lot better right now than they were last year. I think Tampa's worse than they were last year. So that kind of makes me like the Leafs here. And I just wonder, like, how are people thinking about this series if those historic factors weren't there? And I say it all the time because I'm a Caps fan, but also because I lived through it and saw this of 100% of analysts picking Pittsburgh to beat Washington the year they finally did, or the year the Caps finally beat them, because it's so true. People think all that history matters, and it doesn't. Imagine how easy gambling would be if you could just look at shit like that and it actually told the story every time. We'd all be rich and the sports books would be poor.
There is a Leafs bet I do like. I like Cal Yarncroc to lead the series in scoring, in goals, I should say. He has played on the top line a lot this season. He's played in the top six a lot. Is there a better gig than on the wing with Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews? Maybe not. And if he's not there, he might play with John Tavares or William Nylander. So there's just a lot pointing to Yarncroc having opportunities to score goals. Additionally, like you said, like there's a chance that the Leafs are just much better than Tampa, and if it's a short series and Yarncroc has one big game in a 4-game sweep, who knows? So I just think the number on him is.
I'm actually mad. So you were very right saying this would move the other way. I didn't think it would. I put too much stock in what I thought a million, probably less large bets would do. But I was excited to take a shot on Toronto to win in like 5 games. And then I look, and that's like the most favored result of the series. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to go that far. Like, I still think Tampa's pretty damn good, but we'll see. It's obviously I think I was kind of pissed that they stacked this one in the Devils game. I know there's a million things that go into picking which teams play on which nights, but those were like the 2 East series that I really, really wanted to watch. Probably the 2 that I wanted to watch the most altogether. So
you can't have them go up against the Islanders. Too many people will be watching the Islanders.
Hell's Bruins, great.
The Avalanche and Kraken now. Avs minus 260 on the series line. Kraken plus 210, game one, which is Tuesday night. Minus 190 for Colorado. Kraken plus 155. Over under 6. I think Avs, you can maybe back the Avs in a sweep if you want. I could just totally. The path to success for Seattle is so dependent on kind of what you said, and there's a possibility it happens with like a goalie just turning into a pumpkin, and that goalie being Alex Georgiev here for Colorado, who was really good for them, and they don't really need, as they proved last year, they don't need like outrageously good goalie play to win. And if Georgiev is better than Grubauer or Jones or whoever the Kraken want to throw out there, the Avs should win this, and I think the likelihood of that is pretty high. So I don't think I'd be afraid to play like it's only 5.5 to 1, but on the sweep, I don't think it's a terrible bet.
Yeah. I thought the Kraken finished up the year really well. They played really good that last time versus Vegas when Vegas was playing for the division. You could say that was probably a summary of why the Kraken will never win this series, because they lost that game 3-1. They probably should have won 5-1, but that's just Kraken hockey. And then the other thing is the question, like, to 4 depth lines with not much in the way of superstar talent, that becomes less effective in the playoffs when, if this series gets deep, Colorado will basically just roll 3 lines and then you're losing more matchups. But I think that the Kraken are now back to being better than the average person thinks. I'm pissed because I love this team. Like, as a fan, I think they're a really good story. And I think they're starting to play a really good two-way game. But this is just a really, really tough matchup. Colorado's going to have their whole D-core back. They haven't really had that at all this year. They're health-wise, Colorado's looking pretty good. It sounds like it's going to be probably just basically just Landeskog and then maybe Malgin. But I think that the Kraken are better than people think at this point. I don't want to trust the goaltending at all, though, which is what's scary. For game one, I think the over is a pretty good shot because I don't think Colorado's worried about, playing a fairly open game. I don't think it's going to make they snap into like some sort of lockdown playoff style. I think they're happy to take their chances that way. And then the way the Kraken have played this year, like they want to attack and get pretty aggressive. And I still think they're going to score their share of goals in this series. Maybe I'll be wrong because obviously the Avs are really, really good defensively. But I think the Kraken are going to find their way to score their goals at 5-on-5 in the series. Like, I'm kind of willing to bank on that to start and see where it goes. But I think the problem is going to be that their goaltending is just so bad, and they're going to have a hard time keeping the top guys in check. So for game one, I think the over is a pretty solid look. And I don't know. I think maybe I'll end up looking at an idiot thing this, but I think they might make it a scrappier series than people think. But
yeah, it could. One of the things
I hope so. And I hate the way the West shook out. Like, I couldn't be more mad that the series are Kings, Oilers, one of them's out. Kraken, Avs, one of them's out. I wish that I could have mingled those in some way with the other teams, because I just think this is, like, in terms of kind of what I wanted to see as a fan, and maybe some of those teams going on surprise runs. And I don't think I'll tuck this in really quick. I don't think we touched on it, but it sounds like Fiala's not going to play game one in the Kings series. Yeah. And which sucks. That's a tough one for them.
And if he's not playing game one, that means he's not going to be 100%, or nobody quote unquote is 100% at this time of year. But
this is like where it's bad. Like, you might see him play and be worthless. Exactly. We see that happen with a couple players every year where, like, they'll take a game, and then Velarde's sounds like he's going to stay out too. They got Mikey Anderson back, but that's not the full strength Kings. I was kind of rolling my eyes seeing some takes out there saying the Kings just don't have the star power. Well, they don't have their guys. They don't have their top star. And they don't have the star power the Oilers have. They have Mick Draisaitl. No one has that shit. Like, that's
Brock Nelson and Kyle Palmieri's
two-headed monster. Like, if you traded those two and the Kings' top 2 stars, imagine how insanely good the Kings would be. Like, that's kind of where I still think this is at. But this is like the first time the Oilers have had like a fairly well-rounded team, and this is what people are saying about it. I think we're starting to see like that take it a little stretched, where it's like, you know what I mean? Like, they're pretty well built now. They're well built when they have those two, though, is kind of more the thing.
Yeah, this just to go back to Kraken Avalanche real quick before we move on. One of the things I think kind of broke the wrong way for Seattle is had they ended up playing Dallas, who would have won the division if Colorado didn't, you could have said, okay, these teams, I know the Stars have Jason Robertson or whatever, and he'll be the best goal scorer in the series, but you would say, okay, these are two teams that like to roll four lines, good, like can roll three defense pairing, and then the goaltending disparity it would be still wide, but that would be anybody against Seattle. And one thing I like to look at in these series is almost does what this team does what this team does better than most. I think Toronto and Tampa is a pretty good example of this, so I'll use them. Toronto's got a great power play. They've got a ton of top six, scoring talent, and they've been better defensively this season as well. But those two things, like, usually are what gives Toronto separation against teams. Like, bang, great power play, and a terrific top six. Well, Tampa has those things too. So the gap shrinks a little bit. Whereas with Seattle against Colorado, though, you would kind of hope that those things would have matched up better, and I just don't think they do. When you look at, okay, what does Colorado do that would widen the margin of error for Colorado? Well, they've got incredible, talented forwards, got the best defense pair in the league. So you're like, okay, maybe Seattle can find a way to mute those things, and then you get to the goaltending, and you're like, well, that's out of it. So it's like two out of the three things that separate Colorado from most teams and make them great. Seattle, I just don't think can shrink the gap as much, which is why I do see a real easy path for a blowout in this series. But as you say, and we've said, and we'll keep saying, it's the Stanley Cup playoffs. So,
well, and I think the easiest way to summarize it too, I think the Kraken are an underrated side right now, and if you gave them another goalie, I still think this team is so damn good. And the other thing, when you talk about like them playing the Stars, Dunn and Larson has been an unreal duo. I'd like the way that you can match up, trying to stick those guys on the Stars top line. I think the Kraken would have matched up a lot better versus Vegas too.
Yeah,
which is probably obvious because Vegas is a worse team than Colorado. But yeah, it sucks because I really don't want to see it go that way.
bad break.
So
A bad break for the Kraken, and you look at, like, the Islanders could have went to Boston, and you think about the gap that would have been there for the Islanders. Like, okay, what makes the Islanders a live underdog? It's their goalie. Well, they're going up against the Vezina winner, so they would be screwed. So I think those things do kind of come into play here when you're handicapping these series. Finally, we'll get to the Jets and Knights. We talked about the Islanders being a trendy underdog in the East. The Winnipeg Jets are a very trendy underdog, I think, in the West. They are plus 140 to win the series. Knights minus 170. Vegas minus 150 in game one. Jets plus 130. Over-unders 5.5. I know you like the Jets in a long series, like betting Jets in 6 or something. I think if you like the Jets, I actually don't mind betting them to win in 5 or less or something too. And just banking on the goaltending disparity to really show up. Because I think a lot of people are paying so much attention to Hellebuck versus whether it's Laurent Brossoit, Jonathan Quick, whoever, being a huge gap in favor of Winnipeg. The Jets have more scoring talent than the typical, this team has the best goalie in the series underdog. Like, when that narrative's thrown around, you just assume, okay, well, the rest of the team must be just, looking like the Islanders almost. Like, there's no real oomph to their top 6. This team has it. So I could see the Jets running away here if Hellebuck versus Laurent Brossoit is as pronounced as we think it may be.
yeah, my problem with that is just the way the games probably go. I think it's
Yeah, you
more
need the
one
breaks.
Vegas.
You would need yeah, you need 2 overtime wins. And
yeah. So I think the Jets are probably the more valuable betting side. I bet them in game one. They were at plus 140, I think, is still out there. I'd bet that. So take your shot on that. The Jets kind of showed more of that play that was going on early in the middle and earlier the year, where people were kind of making them the trendy cup pick. They've got Hellebuck versus the Brossoit And they've got a much worse decor than Vegas, who seem like they're going to be pretty healthy here. And maybe there's a world where Vegas can just lean on that and kind of control more of the play both ways. And Stone's going to play. He's perfectly healthy now.
Yep.
So I think, I don't know. I think Winnipeg's the valuable side, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Winnipeg game one. However you want to play them to win the series, I think is fine too. I think even if they go down and lose game one, you can buy back in. And then Connor Hellebuck is another great example of a team whose future odds are going to be half of his Conn Smythe odds. And Mark Scheifele, great player. Nikolai Ehlers, we love him. Pierre-Luc Dubois, good center.
Ehlers will get 6 minutes of ice time. So
yeah. If someone goes off for the Jets, that's great. It doesn't matter because if they're in the Stanley Cup final, if they win the Stanley Cup, it's because Connor Hellebuck is standing at that end of the ice, and he is dog tired from putting up like a 930. So Hellebuck at 80-1 as a Conn Smythe bet. If you believe in the Jets at all, I think we both believe the Jets are a good value to win the series. And if they do, it means that he's been really good, and his Conn Smythe odds will severely be slashed should that come. So he's another one, like you said.
In Vegas, I think they're a team where I would just have like a more blatant opinion that I think I'm low on them relative to market. I didn't think they won so many games down the stretch, but I never thought that they looked that good. I thought their division winning game was a really good take on that. We bet Vegas in that game. I think that was the last podcast play, right? Was saying this would win that game. And like one period in the game, I was like, holy shit, we're actually going to lose this bet. And then they found a way. But it just seems like there was a lot of finding a way when it was like giving up a lot of chances against. Like some of their greatest strengths down the stretch was goaltending. Brossoit stopped 30 of 31 in that game.
Yeah, he was good.
So it's a 1-game sample, but it was a big game. And I thought Seattle really carried the play.
As soon as he came back up, he was good. So like there's a universe here where he just got red hot and turns it to Jordan Binnington, where it happens. Michael Leighton, like the Stanley Cup playoff history is littered with goalies who just get hot.
Yeah, like, for sure. That's the thing. You can't count on him just being bad, but that just scares me when you're talking about a team where like,
no, you don't want to bet that. You don't
maybe
want.
They're not even
if you flip the odds, you'd be like, we'd be sitting here talking about, man, Laurent Brossoit in good form. Maybe he can contend with Hellebuck, but he's the favorite. So do you want to lay this money with Laurent Brossoit?
It scares me to think like you're backing Vegas at that number. Their goaltender's Laurent Brossoit, and you don't know that they're actually going to even carry more of the play.
Yep.
That seems like a pretty iffy proposition to me.
All right. Well, that wraps up. So the way this is going to work for the playoffs, we just gave you game ones, our favorite bets for the game ones coming up Monday and Tuesday. So we'll reconvene sometime Tuesday to preview Wednesdays and Thursday. Then we'll do it again the every other day, basically cadence until the games start to come off the schedule. And that's it. So for Nick Martin, I'm Michael Leboff. Thank you to our sponsor, BetMGM. This has been Line Change. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and do all that stuff. The playoffs, obviously, it's when people start to realize hockey still is around, and there are a bunch of hockey podcasts out there, and we thank you for choosing ours. So we'll see you again in a couple days, and good luck with all your bets.